Okay, let us start by reciting Surah Al-Fatiha. Alhamdulillah. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Today we are going to discuss a very important figure as far as the contemporary Muslim scholars related to the interpretation of the Quran are concerned. Then we are going to see how different this scholar is compared to what we have discussed so far. And according to the study plan that we have, this will be the last scholar among the modern Muslim Mufassirun that we are going to discuss. And the last topic will be about how to respond to, to the current situation as far as the Tafsir is concerned. When you look at many scholars in the West or in the East, let's say Muslim scholars, especially we are going to look at those who abuse the Tafsir, the way they interpret the verse of the Quran according to their own intention or their own, reasoning without having a proper understanding. So we are going to look at maybe some selected text related to selected contemporary Muslim scholars, especially those who look at the Quran according to the, to certain themes, if we said that, and they are trying to prove what is promoted by others instead of proving what is promoted by Islam itself. So that is how we respond, and perhaps we can see how to make use of the Tafsir, the Quranic text, in order to provide answers and solutions to contemporary problems that we have. Maybe we can take one verse related to what we are going through, then we try to interpret the way we see it appropriate and relevant to our time. So that will be next class, but today let us see that today we are going to focus on Fazlur Rahman. So I have shared with you the slides, and I believe that we have gone through the slides, and today we are going to have a discussion. So this will be, as I mentioned, this will be the topic about Fazlur Rahman. So we do like what we have done for other scholars. So what is different about Fazlur Rahman? As we mentioned, we had, during the same time, we had many Muslim scholars who are dealing with Tafsir, as well as other disciplines, if I said that, other disciplines that were dealing with that, how they respond. But Quran is very important, being the first primary source of Islam, and is and knowledge. When you look at knowledge, the primary source of knowledge for Muslims and humanity, and this is divine. When I say divine, is revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we have discussed at the very beginning. But let us see briefly, in order to understand the views and the approaches of Fazlur Rahman. Before that, let us go through a brief information about Fazlur Rahman. Who is Fazlur Rahman? So let us see it. So this is the name, Fazlur Rahman, but they pronounce it like Fazlur Rahman in English. And he was born on 21st September 1919 in Pakistan. Then you can say why he migrated later on to India. Now he died on July 26, 1988, So it is like 2 years before the fall of communism. This man died at the age of 68 years old. So according to the literature that I have referred to, and he was born in Pakistan, in Hazara district. That is one district in Pakistan. And according to what I have looked at, as far as his school of thought is concerned, looking at him, his family coming from, when he was born in Pakistan and living there until he grew up, and looking at that, so we can say that he belonged directly or indirectly to the Hanafi school of thought, even though it is not very clear, but we can see that he was very much influenced by two great scholars of that time, that they had maybe their approach was not like the approach of the scholars that we have discussed previously. He was very much impressed by the writings of Shah Waliullah and Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan. And you have to bear in mind that during the time we had Abu Ala Maududi, Iqbal, and other Muslim scholars who had different approaches compared to Shah Waliullah and Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan, who are considered those who use the reason, especially when we look at Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan. And further, we can see that this is reflected in the personality of Fazlur Rahman. So that is how the most important thing here, what he wanted to look at, because when you look at Fazlur Rahman, let's say as others, so we have to acknowledge the fact that Muslims, when they were colonized by the Westerners during the time, the system of education was very important. Now, that is the only reason that how Muslims responded to the values that were introduced by the Westerners and how they changed the system of education. And in order to bring it back, or to if we said that to make it normal as it was, and to make it go in line with the developments of that time, maybe some Muslim scholars were very fair with that. They maintained better understanding about the sources, whereas some others, maybe they abused, they were trying to more look at it from the Western perspective instead of from the Islamic perspective. And some, they talk about this integrated approach. But when you look at integrated approach, so we have to make sure that the evaluation, it is done by the sources of Islam, Quran and Sunnah. It is like what Muslims have and what the West is have, then we provide the Islamic approach, the right Islamic methodology, in order to balance between these two approaches, because we know that even Muslims during that time, they had a very isolated approach, a very narrowed approach. Maybe the time itself was like that during the colonization. They were saying that if we don't accept the values of others or the colonizers, perhaps we can maintain what we have, but it was difficult because we have to develop as well at the same time. That is how, as I mentioned here, as you can see, that even Fazlur Rahman was very much concerned about the system of education. And he thought that in order to look at it from that point of view, then maybe that would be a kind of renewal of Islamic education to make it suitable for the time that they were living. And of course, I mean, he was very critical when I look at the tradition that was presented by the Muslims, because as I mentioned, those who were not accepting development, according to him, that was a kind of, I mean, backwardness. So in order to respond to them, then he had, to present his point of views, and we are going to mention it later on. But this is the reality, as I mentioned, at the early stage. Now, how his scholarly personality was developed, as I mentioned previously, from the early age, as other scholars, so they used to come from very, if we say, Muslim families that preserved the Islam and the teachings of Islam. And Fazlur Rahman, he did take his first education at home, even though during the time his father used to send him to Darsun Nizami. That was the system that they used for the education of the children during the time. But at the same time, of course, they used to have a balanced studies in that Darsun Nizam according to the time. Then later on, Fazlur Rahman was able to be enrolled in the school that they had a modern system of education, that had a modern system of education that made him to work very hard and to excel in his studies. And you can see that from the early age, he loved very much to study Arabic language. Then he according to his understanding and his hard work, So that made him to win, if we say the honor, the first class honor in Master Arabic Language in Punjab University in 1942, So you see, we can see here that Fazlur Rahman was focusing on the language of the text, the language of the text, that is Arabic language. And later on, he pursued his studies in England, in Oxford. Then he wrote about Ibn Sina in 1946. Maybe the treatise or the thesis that he wrote about his PhD made him to be acknowledged by others, especially the Western scholars, that he focused on psychology. And we know that the Western, they look at religion from different disciplines, and psychology is one of them. So that is very important, but at the same time, we know that Fazlur Rahman was very critical, then he used to study even philosophy beside psychology. And you can see that other language that made him to be more influential as far as the world of academia is concerned, it is that he studied German and French languages. That is very important. You see, now we can say that he mastered the three very important languages of that time. Then you can see that later on how he completed. According to the literature that we have, so they mentioned that he was very hardworking and he sacrificed all his time to finish his studies in PhD within 3 years. And because of that, he was affected physically, and his health, especially the eyesight became very weak. That is how we can say that later on his works were appreciated by others, and he moved from one place to another place, especially when I look at how he later on, when he became a lecturer 58 Islamic philosophy at Durkheim University. Then later on, he became an associate professor in Institute of Islamic Studies, McGill University, Montreal. This is in Canada. And 62, he was named the director of the Central Institute of Islamic Research in Pakistan. And he continued until 1968. So we can say that this is very important. And that is how the personality of Fazlur Rahman was shaped by all these, travelings as far as the knowledge is concerned. And you can see that, when you look at his personality, according to the writings, some of them, they have mentioned him to be a modernist interpreter of Islam. So not only interpreting the text, but he was interpreting Islam as a way of life, the teachings of Islam. And as we are going to mention later on, when you look at his tafsir, that is focusing on the main themes of the Quran. And these are the main themes of Islam as well, when you look at the Islamic worldview, but we might agree or disagree with the way he interpreted these themes. And it is, when you look at it, how, as I mentioned previously, how critical he was to the traditional approach, the way how the people used to interpret Islam during his time, So here you can say that how he became very particular in the field. Then you can say that his work on tafsir, so as I mentioned, this is the work on tafsir, that is major themes of the Quran. Then it was written in 1980, and you can see that how this is the first, why I brought this, because this is the first cover page that was sent by him to the Biblioteca Islamica to be published, and that is the first edition, and later on it was improved. You can see that the second cover page here, and this is the first. So that shows, of course, that did take him a long time to produce this masterpiece. And then I have shared with you when I look at the work itself, how it started, and it is mentioned here. You see, he started at the end of his life. If we said that 1970s, he started that while he was conducting a khutbah, when he mentioned one of the themes that are addressed in the Quran, related to morality and how people should behave. That is, and of course, you can see that he was living in that part of the world, in the West. And here we can say some of them, when you refer to even the one that I have shared with you, how they present Fazlur Rahman as a young, very energetic person, And he showed all these ideas in this khutbah, the way he explained to them, according to his understanding, the Islamic approach, according to his understanding. And we can say that even in this khutbah, his inclination was more towards the Hanafi, approach, the Hanafi approach. And later on, we can say that 7980, the work was completed and published. Maybe we can say sent for publication. So that is the length of the work, 138 pages I've shared with you. And this present very comprehensive. It is though, but it is different from others. When you look at the table of contents that I have shared with you here, it represents the content of his book that is very thematic in nature. So he has identified the most important themes that are very fundamental for Islam as a way of life. When you look at the teachings of Islam, these are very fundamental, and they have been addressed by the Quran. So that is very important. So here I have shared with you the reason why he started to write this tafsir. Perhaps I think maybe this you have gone through it. Maybe it's not necessary for us to look at it. You see, maybe that was, if I may say here, the most important thing that convinced him to write this tafsir when he looked at the way how some Muslims and non-Muslims presented the text, the Quranic text, how they addressed and how they comment in the Quranic text. Maybe that is one of the main reasons and something that he did not see the reality, what he wanted to present that is very thematic in nature. Maybe other Muslim scholars, belonging to the classical times and even to contemporary time, they studied or they interpreted the Quran according to the verses, but he interpreted the Quran according to the themes, without, going from verses, one by one. That is another thing that I mentioned here. For example, the idea related to the concept of God. So that is very important theme according to Fazlur Rahman. That is behind. When you look at the characteristics, or the main characteristic of God that shows His oneness, and he mentioned this, the idea of monotheism. The idea of monotheism, how this has been addressed in the Quran, that resembles the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let us look at the methodology. So as I mentioned previously, his methodology is different from others, and that is why it is tafsir mawdu'i, a thematic exegesis. That means you have to choose certain, you come with the themes, they say, of course, that is based on the text, the Quranic text. So the themes that maybe the difference will be the way he interpreted these themes. But when you look at the themes themselves, and the words that he used for these themes, they have been taken from the Quran. Maybe if you write in English, it was better for him when you look at the source itself. Instead of using the word God, he has to use the word Allah, because when you talk about God and the name of God, according to Quran, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because God, anyone can name God. God is the one who, created everything. But when you talk about the name of God, Allah has made it very clear in the Quran that His name is very abstract. Is very abstract. Is not, like the names that have been named by other communities. So we have to make it very clear here. But of course, we can say that he tried his best by using this tafsir mawdu'i. And when I refer to some other Muslim scholars, maybe you heard about Prof. Arpaslan, Achik Kenjik, that he says in one of his works, that is Rahman, while being at the University of Chicago, so he achieved for the first time his long-standing goal of teaching the Quran without the use of any of the traditional commentaries used in classical Islamic education, applying his own Quranic hermeneutics. So it means that he used his own approach, the way he interpreted without, or maybe we can say in other words, that Fazlur Rahman disconnected his way of interpretation from the classical way of the interpretation of the text. So that we can say that is very, something that is very different compared to some other Muslim scholars related to tafsir. And that is made him. I mean, we can say some of them, they say that maybe it could be that they say that some of the text is taken from, copied from the pages of Tafsir al-Qurtubi, but the way he categorized Fazlur Rahman is very different. Is very different from Qurtubi. Now, these are the main themes. So you have Allah, the oneness of our Lord, what he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, man and his roles as an individual. So he identified 8 major themes of the Quran. Man and his duties in society, nature submits to Allah's will, prophets and revealed books, the last day, that means the day of judgment, Satan and the temptations of evil, Muslims are one, that is the Ummah. So the concept of Ummah, the concept of, evil, that is related to Shaitan in this case, temptations, day of judgment, the books and the prophets, the submission to Allah's will, like every one thing that is created by Allah, especially the nature. And then the main focus after the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is man and his role in society. So these are very unique, if I can say, these themes, the way he presented, and we can say are very unique, the way he presented Fazlur Rahman. But let us see here, I have just, try to get some of the examples related to the themes that he has mentioned, like what he discussed, the first theme that is about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Quran. So the Arabic text here, it is presented by me because we don't see the Arabic text in his book, an essay. He mentioned just only the verse in English and the number of the verse. So that is when you look at how he starts, perhaps if you'd like to, any one of you would like to read this passage, let's say when you look at the way he starts, let's say, you see here the second themes, when you look at the third theme, that is man. So I just try to the fourth theme, you see the fifth theme, the sixth theme. So these are the themes, seventh theme, and maybe that is this is the continuity. Then the eighth theme, that is the emergence of Muslim community. Now these are the themes that I just mentioned to you. So I just wanted you to have a clear picture about the themes that Fazlur Rahman has mentioned in his book. Now I have selected a text related to the first theme. Then let us see how it should be, whether what he has mentioned here it is proper. Let's say what kind of, let's say that the approach that he used here. So, any one of you would like to read this text, then we can discuss in order to identify the methods that are used by Fazlur Rahman. Any one of you would like to read the text?
Yes, bro.
Okay, Brother Aziz.
Chapter 1, God. The Quran is a document that's squarely aimed at man. Indeed, it calls self-guidance for mankind, Within-ness, Al-Baqarah 185, and numerous equivalents elsewhere. Yet the term Allah, the proper name for God, occurs well over 2,500 times in the Quran, not to count the terms Rabb, the Lord, and Ar-Rahman, the merciful, which, although they signify qualities, have nevertheless come to acquire substance. Still, the Quran is no treatise about God and His nature. His existence for the Quran is strictly functional. His creator and sustainer of the universe and of man, and particularly the giver of guidance for man and the judgment, individually and collectively, and metes out to him merciful justice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brother Aziz. So now, any one of you would like to contribute to what do you see in this kind of interpretation? So how do you find Fazlur Rahman? Yes, Brother.
The Tafsir Bil Rai he used here, I think. Yes, he used as a guidance for mankind, the part of the generally Tafsir Bil-Rai, I think.
So now the focus is here is on what?
Here, to define, identify Allah Subhanahu wa Taala here. I think.
So the focus on this part, it is on, let's say, identifying who is Allah, who is our Creator. That's why
yes,
this is very thematic. So it is very focused. It is very focused. Is very focused according to his understanding. Okay, Brother Sanjar. Anyone else, please?
Bro, I want to ask a question, bro. So, what does it mean by the fact that Fazlur Rahman didn't use any traditional book of tafsir, whereas we know that each mufassir, each scientist, of course, stand out on the shoulder of his predecessor.
Now, because here in the Quran itself, in his book, he has not mentioned that. Let's say he has not mentioned that. That's why he did not use. So it means like he tried to present a new way of interpreting the Quran without, because when I look at the traditional, if we say that the way, like when I say Quran bil maybe he is according to the way he understands by using his own reasoning, let's say, and that is how he interpreted. But if you look at the proper way of interpreting the Quran, then you have to refer to other references, So we mentioned the methodology that should be used in order to make it, the tafsir authentic. So maybe you can say that whether his tafsir is authentic or not, maybe we can say that is not in line with what a mufassir should be, or should do, because we should have all this approach, bil mathur and bil rai. Then he can use, other ways of interpretation. But this we cannot see here, And beside that, this will make it different from other tafsirs, especially the classical tafsirs, regardless of the way they interpret it, but still they used to make use of, let's say, these the guidelines or the conditions that we have mentioned previously. So I think that's why, Fazlur Rahman, with his approach, affected others, especially those liberal Muslims, the way they got from him. If we say Fazlur Rahman provided this very superficial, if I say, way of interpretation, maybe empty from what is needed, then others made use of that. So it is like, if he interpreted by looking at it the way he understands, others, they will do the same thing, Like some of the Muslim liberals, let's say, the way they look at it according to their interests, So they don't cite, or even if they cite any saying of Prophet ﷺ, even that, maybe they will cite 1 week hadith, or a hadith that doesn't have any credit, So they try their best to support their ideas. So this is what I said, that according to what Prophet Paslan mentioned, that will make a difference between his tafsir and other tafsir compared, because he disconnected completely from the past, let's say. So that is very dangerous, if I say that, Brother Aziz, because we have to continue. Even when we write a research paper, so we have to refer to what has been written. So we cannot just simply write anything that we would like to write. If you want to have a work that is credited, then that should be, you have to go to the sources, the references, to enrich your product, Then you can present your approach by responding to that or making addition to it. So this is what I can say. This is why the way it is, the way, and it is seen here. So he is trying to explain. Now, if we explain the term Allah, then we can say that we can refer to, the vast literature, even Rab, the term Rab. There are many, if we said that dictionaries, Arabic, even, scholars, how they define these terms previously before Fazlur Rahman. So if you want to make it, in that way, to put it in that way, is it clear? And we can say that even these terms, the counting and all these are done even by Ibn Kathir, So it was much better to say you can count, but it was better to present those before you who did that work, So yes, we believe that others, they have done this,
Can I
Yes.
say something?
Yes, brother.
According to my understanding, he tried to how to say deliver this Quranic message to the Western scholars who were teaching Quran, maybe, in order to correct their understanding or translation from Arabic, because they may have a problem with the Arabic language. That's why he didn't use Arabic here in his tafsir, but commonly used English word. And this one opinion, I think. And the next is that most Muslims who lived in Western countries may have not have a proper Arabic language, which they cannot understand the meaning, the Quran, the verses in the Quran. So he tried to gives this opportunity in English.
Maybe
I'm saying this hailing from my experience. I'm not well. My Arabic is not well. I don't know general Arabic, but I read most such things from English or from Uzbek.
Yeah,
I think,
this is what you can say, brother Sanjay, but we are dealing with a scholar, So it's not like translating a simple text, and this is the tafsir. So whether you present this to the, because even when you look at the Western academicians or intellectuals, they deal with Arabic text. So his approach, let's say, is not like just only, a simple approach. So I think that might be, if you said that might be a reason, but still it is allowed. You can use even the Arabic, terms here, because he has used the transliterated version of the Arabic terms. Instead of using the Quranic text, he used the transliterated version, like Hudan Linas. You see the transliteration is used there. But what we are, what we are saying here, another thing that is that he did not consider the contribution of others, So it means that he wanted to present a new way of the tafsir, different from what was presented by the scholars in the past. So that is what we look at here. But we can say that, okay, maybe the way he presents somehow it is not, maybe it's not wrong if we said that, but still, according to some, scholars, the way they look at Fazlur Rahman, so they don't consider him as the, the person that we have to refer to consider him as the authority, considering as the authority compared to other scholars, that we consider them as authority. And even some of them, they mention that he affected, because we can see that if he followed what, Sir Ahmed Khan was saying all about, then we have Sir Ahmed Khan was a different person, So he was not like the right, personality to be followed. So he was very much influenced and inclined to the Western approach instead of, bringing, let's say, or putting a balance, So even though we can say, we don't have to be apologetic, we can be critical as well, because this is very important, And here it is, we are dealing with the very important, text, and that is revelation. When we deal with revelation, then we have to, to maintain it and to interpret it as it is, But as I mentioned, to make it authentic, can we disconnect ourselves from, the past would be difficult, but you can provide, let's say, a tafsir, but you have to refer to the past as well. So this is our concern here, this is our concern here, to give credits, even when I look at the tafsir that we discussed previously, some of them, they give us very brief, interpretation. So they don't give a lengthy interpretation. They don't maybe analyze the issues and how to do, but let's say, okay, maybe so far, if we say that how he's looking at the concept of God, when he looks at the qualities here, so we can say it is very descriptive in nature. He describes according to what Quran says. That is the way he looks at it, that is the way he looks at it, And of course, when he said that the Quran is not just only focusing on God and his nature, and we know that the Quran represents everything, so other themes are presented. So that shows that because if we said that it is like when you write a book, then that book is meant for you, for example. So he wants to say that the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not meant for him. So it is meant for those that he created and made them responsible. But describing himself in the Quran, it will ease the knowledge and the understanding of especially human beings about God, So that is how we look at it, that is how we look at it. And he said that just only giving us certain figures here about, how many times the term, the proper name, that is for Allah, for God, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has been mentioned. We can say maybe some kind of calculation that he did, mathematical calculation, because during the time maybe we didn't have the way we have it today, but he had to read the Quran in order to know how many times the term Allah has been mentioned in the Quran. And we have some of the tafsir that are used are index tafsir, you see by the word, you can say, you can find the verses under the term Allah, you can find all the verses where, the word Allah has been mentioned. So that requires a great effort, to do that. If you did, because if you read the whole Quran verse by verse, you have to take note. It's not like today we have a program, then you just write the term, the word Allah, then it will appear because the program will calculate that easily, Basically, this is what I can say, so we can say the methods that are used by him. Here it is very thematic because he's focusing only on the one theme, that is the concept of God. He is presenting to us and very descriptive in nature, we can say. Can we say that maybe, can we say kind of, elaboration, analysis, when he said that further, one looks at the content of the Quran, you see the Quran, the content of the Quran, and looking at the qualities or the attributes of God, attributes of God, you see, is it clear? And who, and at the same time, he is showing that this is meant for whom, So even here he's presenting another thing that is about man, because said that this is, God is the one who gives guidance for man, and through this revelation,
Prof, I think this is very great contribution indeed. So, to my knowledge, another book of tafsir similar to this is Tafsir Ayatil Ahkam Lis-Sabun. So
yes,
but this is only in the ruling matter, right? So what is another book of tafsir that elaborate the whole Quran as Fazlur Rahman's tafsir?
You mean using the same way as Fazlur Rahman?
Yeah, Mawdu'i, tafsir Mawdu'i, by a single scholar.
When I can say that, as we have discussed previously, I have referred to, let's say, Sayyid Qutb, for example. When he talks about the themes, and he presents the verses of the Quran, then he will identify the themes, like family, for example. If you refer to his tafsir, like family, for example, society. So, but of course, his interpretation is very different. The way he interprets is very different compared to Fazlur Rahman. But you can use, as I mentioned, even when we discuss a particular theme, maybe a problem that we face today, then you have to search how it is, whether it is mentioned in the Quran or not. So that is how it is considered. But if you are going to, I can say that like Sayyid Qutb, for example, the way he mentioned Fi Zilal al-Quran, so he has done the tafsir from, the whole tafsir, but he identified the themes, He identified the themes. So this is what I can say, brother. Aziz.
Okay, bro.
We can do that, We can do that. Okay, brother Nasir. Yeah, please.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Yes, I agree with you, sir. Yes, I agree with you, sir, that this type of tafsir will be dangerous because there are so many people that are trying to misinterpret the verses of the Quran. So, yes, seeing this type of tafsir, they can copy from him and interpret as they wish. And also seeing the themes that this Fazlur Rahman has come up with. I think if more researches were made, there may be so many themes in the Holy Quran that is more than the themes that he has brought out. That is my own perception, but actually he used intellect in his tafsir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. That is right. We can say that is what was the time. Even today, it is like looking at it from the intellectual, understanding. Like the Westerners, they have maybe they look at the Quran like by looking at the language itself, like the language is means of interpretation. But do we have to look at the Quran as such? We say the Quran is not like any other, book that we are dealing with. So that should be a different approach, So this is what as you have mentioned, Brother Nasir. So we have to be very careful. But it is like, sometimes maybe unless you know, this how to deal with the tafsir. If you do not know, then you take it for granted, If you do not know that this is maybe this kind of tafsir is dangerous, maybe it looks like great, you're not aware of what he's talking about because you do not know, then this might attract you. Like when you read, let's say, a book that is written even by philosophers, So when you look at the approach that is used by philosophers, it's very attractive. But at the end, you can say that, oh, this is great, is wonderful. But when you look at the issue, when you know the field, then easily you can understand, Then you can be aware of maybe the gaps and the traps, you can say the tricks that are made there. So this is how, maybe people like him, they were looking at providing, maybe according to them, they said that, okay, why should we follow, the tradition? And that was the trend during the time. Modernity separated tradition, the old from the new. You see that they deleted the old because they said the old doesn't have a meaning anymore. So then we have to provide a new one. So the Fazlur Rahman and some other people like him, they were affected by this movement, during that time, modernity movement up to postmodernity. Because postmodernity, like today, we have, different types of tafsir. When you look at those who have the same approach, like Fazlur Rahman, by using their own intellect, reasoning, and I think that this is good, but the tricks are there. So we have to be very careful, because we have many who claim to be Mufassirun today, and especially they look at it even from the human rights perspective, So they say that they are, for example, you might have a tafsir, related to feminism. For example, that will be thematic as well. They take one theme and they want to justify that. Or even you'll be surprised at how they provide the interpretation of Quran related to all these issues that are not accepted by Islam, but they try to justify it. So we can say that each community, even among the Muslims and intellectuals, they used different approaches and they believe that these approaches are right. So now we have we should provide a system. So there should be a guideline in order to identify whether this tafsir is considered as true tafsir or not. So when we look at the conditions of the tafsir, now one of the conditions that we can say that, I mean, he disconnected himself from the past. This is one condition. Is it clear? I mean, he tried to build everything on the developments that were taking place during his time. That is why we have this kind of, we can say this is a dry type of tafsir, because it doesn't have the foundations. We need the foundations. It is like the khatib. If we have a khatib that he's going to talk about politics, and he doesn't, because when you give the khutbah, then we refer to the Quran and the Sunnah, then you can discuss that issue on this basis. But if you have this khatib that does not refer to Quran and Sunnah, then what kind of khutbah is that, I mean, khutbah, it is discourse. We talk about discourse, and that is the highest discourse that we can see. That is a discourse that was given by all prophets, or was made by all prophets. And you see, the prophets, they were, referring or interpreting. Now we cannot interfere because the prophets, they have the right to interpret the verses, and when they interpret the verse of the Quran and they justify, this will make whatever they say authentic. But we have to refer to the Quran and the Sunnah itself. So if you follow this order, then we can say this tafsir, it is authentic. It is authentic, credited. So this is very important that we have to. So you can give, this kind of. You can use this kind of approach and methodology while discussing the methods that are used by Fazlur Rahman and others. So maybe, something that we see very clear, we see the concept of God. It is the key. We say that, and further he explains even now, other terms that are related to God. Merciful justice. You see other terms that are used by him, as justice temperate with mercy. So he further elaborates that, and you see here by modern writers, like today, we talk about humanism. Now, can you say that humanism, can we use the same interpretation about humanism as it is interpreted by the West? Or we have to look at it from Islamic point of view? We have to look at the way how Islam or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressed, because the word insan, it is mentioned in the Quran. So we look at it and we have to define insan. Who is insan? Then we have the characteristics of being insan. You say that the Khalifa should be a Khalifa, should be Abid, the Abd. You see, should have the concepts about Amana. You see, all this, al-Hikmah. So then we have a different interpretation. But what is happening today, so the terms are taken as they have been provided by others, So you cannot just simply say that this is Islamic, like merciful justice or tempered by mercy, So it's another way of interpretation. Basically, we have to be very careful, Maybe we can say others look at it differently, But we say that this is the way how Islam or Muslims understand according to the Quran as it is addressed. Then we can say others, this is the way how they interpret, the same term. When you look at the same term, because we cannot, simply sacrifice the attributes that are meant for God and the attributes that are meant for creatures that are created by God, That's why he said that, but we shall soon see orderly, creatively, sustenance, guidance, justice, other attributes, and mercifully interpenetrate in the Quranic concept of God as an organic unity. So somehow we can say that he's trying to make a differentiation between what these people talk about merciful justice and the merciful justice related to God, and he's using the term organic unity. So this is organic, what they say, origin. You see, today we use something that is organic based on the origin. But do we have to use this for God, something that is created by God, you know? So even the terms, we have to be very careful, you know? So this is, since all this, I mean, are relational ideas, we shall have to speak of God a great deal in the following pages. So he's saying that, after this, he'll discuss these issues related to God, you know? And at the same time, he has presented to us that he wished to discuss briefly questions of the necessity of God and of one God, and what, according to the Quran, this immediately imply. That is how he is trying to look at it, maybe from the philosophical point of view, you know, from the philosophical point of view as well. We can say that maybe that is the trick that some people, they do not understand, you know, like when he said the necessity of God and of one God, you know. So these are, things that maybe about the concept of God, we say that still he has used here related, the thematic related to one theme, and he is further elaborating according to his understanding and explaining, God and what is all about God. Is it clear? That is how we can say. But if you go into details in order to interpret this text word per word, then you might have a different, understanding. If we go into deep analysis of this text, you know, in order to understand his approach better. Okay, would you like to say anything?
Yes, I agree, Prof, with the statement of the Quran as an organic unity. I see that this is the objective Rahman wanted with his thematic way of tafsir, because if we understand Quran according to its thematic way, we can grasp, we can understand the Quran in the comprehensive way, not separate, not particular way. I really agree.
Okay, Brother Aziz. Anyone else?
Yes. If I say something inappropriate or I mistake, I'm sorry, but you know, he mentioned here a necessity of God and of one God. I think the reasons, I'm trying to understand the reasons like behind his interpretation here. So you know, he lived and understand, or not experienced it, but learned the atheism, the ideas of atheism. So in order to respond them, I think he acted in this way. I think so.
The same way they because he's talking about whether it is necessary for man to believe in God or not. You know, do we need God or not? You know, or one God? Maybe that is how we look at it. You might be right. Brother Sanjar, we have many like him that were trying to interpret in line with what was needed by the society. But this is different. You cannot go, let's say, we have to maintain, we as Muslims, we maintain the same approach, you know. Why should we, unless if you are giving examples, even when you give example related to our own experience as human beings, so as Muslims, we maintain a balance between what we interpret and what we have. So we cannot just simply try to please others. You see, the others, they would like to know the right understanding about this, you know. So if we give them what they have in the line with what they have, it is like when we look at the way how Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam introduced Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within 13 years to the Arabs, you know. So he did not say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the way you look at him. Is it clear? He said that Allah is one. Is not the way that they worship many idols, you know. And Allah is not like you have a special, sacrifice for God and a special sacrifice for the idols. So now the picture was very clear to them. That's why the Arabs rejected. If it was in line with them, they were going to accept. Like if it maybe reminds me the approach of Paul. You know, Paul, when he preached Christianity, his own version to the Romans and to the Greeks, so he presented the way they had. You know, so he was in that line. That's why they were lost, and they did not find this very strange. But if you find it strange, you reject something that is true because it is not true according to you. Then it will be strange, and you reject completely. You know? So it is like, regardless of whatever it is, we cannot just simply, interpret it in order to satisfy the needs of the people. So we have to, when we talk about the truth, it should be presented the way it is. You know, this is, my humble understanding. But maybe here he is raising the question that, like, whether these people, because according to them, they rejected God, you know. So according to them, God is man-made, you know. According to the atheists and the Westerners who do not follow, revelation as a source of knowledge, and others who associate with God, you know. So that is a problem. Are we going to deal with that according to the same or having the same approach? Now, even today, you see that, are we going to present to the non-Muslims the twisted version of Islam, or we present to them the true version of Islam? You see, that is how. The same thing, when we talk about Quran, many of them look at Quran as a production of men. Now, we Muslims, are we going to say that this Quran is like the way they claim? No. We have to maintain our position the way it is, you know. So this is, as I mentioned, that we have to be very careful. It is like even some, educated Muslims, they have been affected, like taking for granted, you know, even putting higher if we look at the ethics that are presented, universal ethics, even they consider this higher, you know, and they consider that the way how Islam presents, the way of life that people should believe and live according to it, they look at it as something inferior, very weak, you know. So that is wrong. You see, I think this is how we have to look at it, you know. So we have to present what we have, and when you argue, you try to bring a sound argument. If they don't accept that, never mind. So we are not going to go down to their level, and provide what they need according to what they have. So we have to give them a different thing, you know. So that will be something catchy for others. So when others, they have a new thing, then this will attract them. Maybe at the beginning it's very difficult, but when it goes slowly, you provide evidences, you justify it, you explain it, further explain, then I think this will be the right thing for them to understand as it is, you know. So this is what I see, Brother Sanjar. This is right. This is clear that he has been affected because he studied them, you know. But we have others, those who studied them, and they were not affected. So it means that his approach, when you look at, he is coming from that background, because he was educated and is all very much attracted by Sir Ahmed Khan, you know. So we have to understand this situation as well. So maybe that is how we look at him compared to Abu Ala Maududi. You see, they're coming, from the same region, but you cannot compare Fazlur Rahman with Maududi. So Maududi's approach is very high, very comprehensive, very Islamic. We don't see this kind of, gaps as we see in Fazlur Rahman. Maybe that is a kind of justification or criticism that you can make what you mentioned. You can say that this is one of the reasons why he has used this kind of approach. You know, this is accepted as well. When you go back to that time, this is accepted. Okay, anything else before we go to the?
Thank you, bro.
You're welcome, brother. So we have to be very careful, you know. Let me see what is. So I just presented you the concept, the first concept. You see here how he looks at the. Say here we mentioned this related to the. Related to the Quran. How he's explaining further. What does the Quran say about God? You know. You see then how God speaks in different. When you look at the Quran, the context, you know. So in different places, how God is addressing different issues related, and what he mentioned here at the beginning. So this, the Quran represents the infinite, attribute of God. You see, even though many Westerners, when I look at combination of ignorance and prejudice, that is how they look at the Quran. You see, the Western, they look at it from that point of view, So it is like maybe he's trying to respond to what they say and the way how it should be, but perhaps it could be done in a better way, And even here he talks about the Quran, that how God speaks, as I mentioned to you. So let us, look at something that here perhaps you see how he has explained. He has referred to what? You see, he has referred to many verses. You can see here many verses in the Quran in order to justify why God at all. You see what kind of question he's talking. It is very philosophical in nature. It's very philosophical in nature. So what Brother Sanjar said, that is right, because when you are, maybe we have other writings today that have been written by Muslim scholars, even by Western scholars, even by scientists, even by philosophers. They put this kind of, question: why God? Why should you believe in God? You see and you see here how he's talking about here as well. Why not let the nature and contents and processes stand on their own without bringing in a higher being, which only complicates reality and puts an unnecessary burden on both man's intellect and his soul. So how do you, respond to this? Then he referred to this, all these questions, what has presented here. So this is answered by the Quran, calls this belief in an awareness of the unseen. So maybe we can say, or you just try, Would you like to try? And one of you would like to try by looking at this?
So he actually wanted to defend the Quran also, bro. He defend the Quran from the misunderstanding of Western scholars, particularly in Muslim sense.
Yeah, he is, of course, he's saying that these answers have been given in the Quran. Why God at all? Why not let the nature? That we say that can the nature stand by itself? Like the house, you build the house. If you don't maintain the house, you don't. If you don't build, if you don't maintain, if you don't provide, if you don't live, so the house will collapse. The same goes to the nature. So that should be when I say that who created nature, for example. If we don't need God, then who created nature? Philosophers, they'll ask many questions. Even they go beyond that, say that who created God? If we believe, since we believe that God is a creator, then there is a full stop. So nobody can ask another question that who created the creator. So then if we say who created the creator, and we say there is another creator, then the creator does not create another creator. So God does not create God, Is it clear? That is how it goes, But he said that this, when he referred to this, and is looking at it like maybe we can say that, of course, people should believe, Like you have to believe in the Quran as the word of God. When people believe in the Quran as the word of God, then they'll believe in God. You see, people those who do not believe in revelation, they have a partial understanding about God. So they do not believe in revealed God, a living God. We say revealed, responding God. See, then we can say who created, who is responsible, who is the provider, All these are related to both the seen and the unseen. We haven't seen God, yes. Because people, they will say that, have you seen God? No, we haven't seen God. But how do you know that God is there? You see, then we have the source of knowledge. Quran speaks for itself. That is from God. Do you have any other book to talk in that way? Even other, books that are claimed by other religious communities to be from God, because of the corruption, they don't have the same content like the Quran. You see, not only that, but the Quran has named the way of life that people should follow. You see, being from God, talking, reflecting what God wants us to do. So that is very clear. Yes, Brother Sandra.
I think I understand that why he used this approach in his tafsir. If you mentioned correctly that the modernism is rejection of old and accepting new, all traditions. So I think the Fazlur Rahman tried to explain Islam and Quran in a modern way, which is widely accepted by Westerners in the language of their language, in their scientific language, not traditional way, because they rejected all not Islam, but they rejected their own traditions, Christianity. So I think the Fazlur Rahman act in this way in order to not only explain the Quran and the Islam, but to give a discourse in about the God and about the religion in a society where these things are being rejected.
Okay, Brother Sandra, that is good, yeah. Even today we are doing the same thing, but we have to be very careful, because this approach might create a problem as well. So you can, let's say we say that we go down to the level of people, but when you're dealing with the people, then our approach should not be changed, So when I say approach, identity. So Muslims' identity should not be changed. It is like when you deal with a child, you have to go to the level of the child to understand the child. But this is not the same approach when you deal with a non-Muslim, So can you say that we go, but we can talk about things that we have in common, because they don't believe in God, for example. Then we talk about things, bounties. We can talk about what they possess. We talk about things that are seen to them, because whether we like it or not, they don't believe in God. Even if you try your best to explain to them, but we can bring it through another approach. That will be much better. When I look at what they have, you see the life that they have, the health, for example, they have to appreciate, they have to know from where do they get this, So that all these questions will lead to God himself. Then we don't talk about any God that people go to him, but we hear Islam, the Quran is talking about, as I mentioned, living God, God who responds. And we said that the revelation, the Quran doesn't need any one of us to defend. The Quran defends itself. Exactly. What we claim as Muslims is not that we claim, but it is what Quran claims. Then if we claim different from Quran, then we create a problem. So this is what should be the approach, That's why here he has, identified verses, many verses here. So of course they are not, related to one particular, surah in the Quran, but they are related to different surahs, So these verses are used as a source in order to identify what he mentioned here, the Quran belief in and awareness of the unseen, for example. So it's not just only a physical understanding of things, but it is related to belief as well. So people should have Iman. So Iman, it comes on what basis? Base that you are convinced that God is there, But how you are convinced if you don't have a source? So this is what I say. People, when you ask them, they say, I believe in God, I feel that God is there. So many people say that, but how can they say if they don't have a source to refer to? That the source talks for itself. So this is our concern here. We are not talking about things that are, rational or irrational or unreasonable. we talk about from Quranic point of view, we said that sound, that should be a sound reasoning. Sound reasoning that is based on the creation, the way Allah created, human beings. And this, because revelation does not contradict sound reasoning. So that is how we look at it. So if that is the case, then easily we can avoid, because people, as I mentioned, they said that, okay, the nature tells me that God is there. But people in the West, they don't believe they believe in nature as such. Even today, if you see in the West, even when you look at the Christmas that is celebrated by Christians, so the way they have, commercialized, all these things, it doesn't have to do anything with Christianity. So the same thing will happen to Islam when Muslims do not present Islam as it is, or will happen to Quran when Quran is not presented as it is, will happen to God when people do not look at God the way God commanded them to look at him. So that is how we comment on that, But I don't know, it was better, maybe you can say for Fazlur Rahman, not just only to present these verses as justification, but it was better for him to elaborate, that would be, if you look at it, you cannot just simply tell the people, okay, refer to Surah Baqarah, this giving the answer. So I would like to see the interpretation. How does he interpret, this belief in and awareness of the unseen? Basically, that is how we can, we can make some kind of explanation to know that should, needed by Fazlur Rahman, maybe further explanation in order to justify what is said about this, Maybe people would like to know more about this, to go into details, You cannot just simply say that believe. Then people ask another question, what do you mean by believe? Then we say, no, it's not believe, because we say Iman is not believe. Iman, when I am convinced that God is there, it is like i'tiqad, yukni'u. So, min ikna, that is i'tiqad, when you say that I think. But is it believe? When you look at the process itself, then you say, when I'm convinced that this is from Allah, then nobody can change, because I'm convinced already, So that is a true Iman. But when you talk about believe, people, they don't believe. When I said that, do I believe in you? You see, it's not the same that I'm convinced about what you are saying, So that is how we look at it, and how we have to justify, they say, even though we said that whether people consider it as such or not, perhaps what you want to get, you will get, but if they don't, then you might not get. So that is not our concern, Our concern here as Muslims, and if we said that Fazlur Rahman, his approach should be to be informative in nature, You have to inform them what Allah says about himself in the Quran. So this is what they need. You don't have to argue, you don't have to present this kind of arguments, And you just give us very simple explanation, something that is very much needed by people. Basically, that you ask the child, then you want the child to explain, then you have to provide justification, examples, make it easy, then the child will understand. You don't need explanation from child. You want the child to understand, to accept, to follow. So that is how it is. We consider non-Muslims being at that level. You see, they're ignorant about Islam, they're ignorant about Allah. They might know, but because they picture out God as something that is framed by man, So according to them, in reality, God does not exist. But anything that people adore and worship is God, according to them, But Quran does not talk about this kind of God. Is it clear? So this is man-made God. So we have to make it very clear. And this is philosophical. The philosophers, the way they presented the case, it is like man is reaching out to God. And this is exactly what others are doing. You see, whereas the atheists, they don't reach at God, they don't believe at all, They don't bother to talk about God. That's why they say nature is just like that, unique, very organic. Who created nature? Finished. They don't talk about this. You see, but whereas the philosophers, they put this question. You see, why God at all? You read the, contemporary philosophers, even in the past, this is how they look at it, you know. So here we can say that he has combined this kind of approaches because we have to know that even in the West, they started from that point of view, I mean, reasoning, argumentations, whereas the scientists, they don't provide these arguments. You know, if the science will prove it, then finish. If the science will disapprove, then they don't accept, you know. So they're not going to argue, whereas the philosophers, they argue. So they'll bring you around, then you not get the answer. So that is a philosophical approach. But what the Quran gives for us, it is very straightforward, you know. It's not speculative in nature, is real in nature. So it is in line with what Allah created. It's not against the fitra, I mean the human nature. So that is how we look at it, you know. So that is how the case should be provided or presented in that way. So we don't have we don't need, I mean, are we going to argue with people if they don't believe in Allah? That is the case, you know. No, we just provide, we convey, you know, we just convey the message. So this is what I'm trying to say here, because we have seen in the past when Muslim, philosophers presented the case by this speculation, then that created a problem. So when you look at the early stage, how the Muslim presented, when you look at Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the great companions and the tabi'un, when they presented the Quran and how they reflected in the practices, there were not arguments, you know. You see this, we can say that even jidal is not argument. Is it clear? That's why Allah said that if they argue with you, Ya Muhammad, then there is a problem. So you don't have to argue with them, you know. You just provide what I convey to you. You just convey to them as it is, you know. Is it clear? So it is like we are wasting our time with people when they do not, when they enter into this kind of argument, you know. But when you provide the case, we just give it to them because this might lead to a different position. Let's say when you enter into arguments, when you present facts as they are, informative in nature, you can explain to them, you know, you can argue on the basis that is right. You can argue on the basis that is right. Then this is accepted. Otherwise, this might lead to a different approach, you know. It is like we can, when you say that argument that we provide, that is justification to support, you know. And we are not going to be offensive, is it clear? We are not going to be offensive in our approach. So we are not going to mock or to look down, you know, because people, they'll do the same thing to us. And Allah said that you don't have to, la tasubu. So you don't vilify, you don't look down at what others have. So if we have that approach, as I mentioned, is not speculative in nature. Philosophical approach is very speculative in nature, but we present the moderate approach. As Muslims, we should be moderate, you know. We don't talk about Islam being a moderate religion because others, they misunderstand. But Muslims, moderate, we don't go beyond the limits that are set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is how we understand moderation here. It is like being humble, being polite, you know, the attitude that you show, take care of one another, don't be arrogant, you know. So this is what we don't take between being polite and arrogant, you know. So people, they look at it from that middle path. But moderation, from our perspective, we live according to the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is how I understand, you know. I don't know if you'd like to say anything about this, please. You are free to say anything, to discuss about this.
Yes, bro. I just want to continue about the reason behind Al-Ghazali's, Rahman's absence of citing traditional tafsir of book. So it just crossed my mind that Al-Ghazali also wrote a book on philosophy without citing any single of the verse of the Quran. So why he did so? Because it was intended to respond to the way to respond to the other philosophers. So Al-Ghazali should write the way other philosophers wrote the subject matter. So maybe in order not to be apologetic. So what do you say, bro?
No, maybe I can say that if you provide the, let's say here we are talking about the interpretation of the Quran, Brother Aziz. Now, if you are arguing on something that you don't bring in Quranic verses, you try to explain to them on human experience. I think I don't see any problem. Is it clear? Because when you talk with people, we are not going to cite from the verse, but when you write, like, because he's talking about tafsir, you know, and Imam al-Ghazali was talking about philosophy. So it's not necessary, because philosophy, if I say that, and the Quran came to reject all this corruption that was presented by all that were before the coming of the Quran, you know. So the Greek philosophers, they presented this corrupted approach about God, you know. And we had the Christians who, corrupted, and the Jewish people corrupted, and others. We had atheists, and even the Arabs themselves, you know. So that is how the Quran came to respond to all this. Then why do we have to follow the Greek philosophy when the Greek philosophy was answered by the Quran? Because it is corrupted, you know. So that is why Imam al-Ghazali, when he studied Greek philosophy, so it took him like 2 or 3 years to study that, you know. So he presented the subject the way, because he wanted people to understand, you know, based on their experience. But his argument was sound argument. So we can say indirectly, you can present the Islamic approach that is sound approach without creating problems. Is it clear, brothers? So that is what I can say the reason. Even today we can do that, the same thing, you know, when you are going to talk with people, but you make sure that your approach, it is pleasing Allah. It's not necessary, let's say, to cite from the Quran and Hadith, because whatever you say, it is in line with that. So this is what I can say, you know. But when you are dealing with tafsir, and if you are writing a paper, then you don't cite, then this is a problem. You know? Even sometimes when you talk with Muslims, brothers, when it's different when you talk with the non-Muslims. But when you present maybe in a paper into a bigger audience, then we cite from the Quran. So we go according to that, you know. But with the Muslims, yes, because the Muslims are aware of it, you know. When you say Qala Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fil Quran al-Kareem, you see that is clear, they know. It's not the same like a non-Muslim. They say, when I tell my neighbor that Allah has said in the Quran, then I have to explain to them what is the Quran all about, you know. But when I talk to them, when I present the case through my behavior, my approach, they say, then let them, ask about my situation. So that will be, a different case, you know. If Fazlur Rahman, because he has other writings as well, not only this, you know, but this is very particular about tafsir. If we could say that if, Al-Ghazali, he presented tafsir like that way, then there is another case, you know. But if you are talking about philosophy and you don't refer to Quran, then I don't see any problem, brothers. Is it clear?
Yeah, thank you.
So this is how we look at it, you know. Even now, let's say if you are going to, like, for example, if you want to argue with the Christians, for example, then you refer to what they have. No need to refer to the Quran, you know. So that is, we say that that is the approach, objective approach, you know. We are very objective because we try to refer to what they have to justify what they claim. Even when you look at the philosophers, if we go to the way, then we find many problems. So how this, but there might be something good as well. So that to make use of the humorism properly, you know. So what the philosophers, the Greek philosophers, even though we can say, okay, that is not accepted because they did not follow, but the possibility of being affected by the Jewish community that was there, because nobody can talk about God, you know. You see, unless you have corrupted what God sent to you, and when the Greek philosopher made use of reason to reach God, then the idea of God was there, because the Greeks were believing in many gods, So they were not, I mean, they did not make any difference between what the Greeks believed and what they themselves, the philosophers, created after that, So the Greeks, they believed in man-made God, and the philosophers, they talk about man-made God, the God of reason. So that was not a difference, but the difference could be that instead of worshiping many gods, they said that, okay, there is only one God. So maybe we can say this is very near to the truth compared to this polytheistic nature that was presented by the Greeks, I mean, that is how we can say, because when the Greek, I mean, the philosophers, they read the revelation, the possibility of accepting the truth will be very high, if Allah, I mean, guides them, that is how we look at it. But I don't say that it is accepted, we cannot accept the approach of the philosophers. They are out, That's why when you use the Islamic methodology based on the Quran and the Sunnah, that is how we evaluate others. So a Muslim should do this spontaneous evaluation. But if you do not know, then it will be very difficult. If you do not know others, you do not know Islam, then there will be a problem, But first, as I mentioned, we have to know Islam, because Islam identifies what is halal and what is haram. So what is halal and haram will be there until the day of judgment, So you cannot just simply redefine what is halal and redefine what is haram. And this is what these liberal Muslims are doing today. You see, they're redefining what is halal and they're redefining what is haram. And you end up that there is no big difference between halal and haram. So they make it what is halal, they make it haram. What is haram, they make it halal. But we have to be very straightforward, So this is, I mean, what I can say, I mean, Brother Aziz. So if you have any further, I mean, clarification. So we have to be very careful,
Thank you, bro.
Even now, when you talk about, I mean, let's say we have to make it clear even to the young generation, for example, because they have been affected by all these values, the technology, the system of the education that we have. When they go outside, you go to supermarket, when you go, we have to tell them what is all this about, By looking at it, then we make sure that they have established the personality that is according to Islam. So only then they can walk, let's say, according to Islam. I mean, we don't have to worry. We don't have to worry, Okay, do you have anything else?
Nothing, bro.
It is like you might have like these issues, for example. I mean, the feminists, they try to present God as she, And some of them present God as man, plural form. Now, when you look at the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has addressed himself as, in Arabic, ana, nahnu, So does it mean that there is plural? No, we said that is a Quranic style, That is, Allah does what he wants. And Allah did not mention himself to be he and she. Is it clear? There is no such thing related to God. Whereas when I talk about he and she, that is related to us because we were created in pairs. So there is no this such thing related to God, Whether God is he or she. Is it clear? Because when I say God is he and she, then we look at God from the way you look at the creation of God. So when you look at what God created, he created everything in pairs. You see, that's why multiplicity will take place. Whereas God is not like that. So that is how we have to make it to be, to respond to that, And the feminists, they look at it, everything is from the feminist point of view. So that is, we have to be very careful. Not to be, we said that, no, there is no such thing, So you look at God from the human perspective. So we have to look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the way he looks at himself. And we look at ourselves the way Allah looks at us, the way Allah addressed us as human beings, not the way we look at ourselves. It is like, we said that Allah created everything, Allah created us. Then we look at what Allah created the way Allah created it, not the way we want to look at it. It is like, can we say that I possess when knowing that what I possess is possessed by God, because God created me and God gifted me with everything, So when God gifted me, then what I'm supposed to do? So I have to take care of it. Then I'll be responsible. It is like God is giving you responsibility. So whatever you said, then I'm responsible. Then it's different between possessing something and being responsible. So that is how we look at it. So others, those who do not believe in Quran, they look at it differently, So everyone has his own perception and everyone has his own worldview and interpretation. So we Muslims should differentiate from others, You cannot just simply interpret according to what others interpret things. So we have to be different, Even though we believe that we are the same as human beings created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes, we don't differentiate in that. But when you look at the worldview, so we Muslims, our worldview is shaped by Quran and Sunnah. Whereas the scientists, they have a different worldview that is shaped by human reasoning. They don't have any source. So who is behind the science is man. This is how we look at it. Whereas who is behind Muslim? When we talk about Islamic worldview and our views, who is behind us, So everything that we view should please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas those who do not believe in Allah, in God, they don't care, they try to please themselves. So then how are we the same? And how the interpretation should be the same? That's why we have, communities of interpretations. You see, even when you look at God, you see some, they interpret God as such, as a tree, as an ambition, as a possession, as a will. And we say, no, there is no such thing in Quran, So nothing can reach the level of God that is created. And we said, all this is created by God, So that will make a difference. So this is what we should do to clarify the doubts that are found among others, even among the Muslims. So that is the role of a Muslim scholar, and that is the role how to interpret the Quran. We cannot just simply say that, okay, today we interpret the Quran according to science. You can respond to science, yes, because Quran is meant for all times, but we don't have to bargain. You see, that is very important here. So we can respond. There are many verses that are responding to our time. That's why we make use of that's why they say contextual. You say according to the context of our time. Let's say today they talk about when you talk about this LGBT, for example, or homosexuals, then immediately we go to the people of Lut, You see, then we look at how Lut alayhi salam was dealing with them. Is it clear? That is how we use the same approach, Because we have the parable, we have the sample. And nobody can deny the fact that everything that people will face, Allah has addressed this in the Quran. Parables are given to us, when people become arrogant. You see, they don't appreciate what Allah has given to them. And we are saying people are better than us. Today people have become slaves of technology, but you look at the people of the past, people of Ad, people of Thamud, the Egyptians, that Allah mentioned in the Quran, how they built all these buildings. Even today, technology doesn't have that ability, but we do other things they couldn't do previously, So it seemed like, we are dealing with the same person, that is man. And man, when he goes astray from the commandments of Allah, then this is the result, This is the result. But we have among them, as I mentioned, among them are those who live very genuine life. So that is according to the fitrah. So dealing with them, that would be easier for us compared to those who know and they corrupt the reality. That would be very difficult. So this is, what we can understand so far. And I hope that we have, while looking at different Muslim scholars about the way they interpreted Quran according to the time that they were living. So I believe that we have learned many things, inshallah, and that will enable us to respond to the problems that we are facing today, and how to cope up with the situation, and what is the right approach that we have to use to interpret the Quranic verses, So that is what we can learn from that. So I hope this will be sufficient for today. So next class, we try to make ourselves suitable to our time and how to make it relevant. And we look at maybe some examples that you might be aware, those who have abused, the interpretation or the text, the Quranic text, and they interpret the Quran as they like it. And as I mentioned, according to they, maybe from different perspective, a non-Muslim or even a Muslim himself, then how do we categorize this kind of interpretation? So I think if you don't have anything else, we can stop here for today, inshallah.
Thank you, bro.
So can you write the names here in the chat so we know? Because that we record, so that is as attendance. Okay, can we stop here for today?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, welcome. May Allah make it easy. So I just remind you about your works. Please try to do your best.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, okay. Yes, Brother Nasir.
Thank you. Jazakumullah khairan, sir.
Same to you. Okay, let us close it by reciting Surah Al-Asr and Tasbih Kafara. Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.